Hello viewers, welcome once again to Your Questions. I am Ibrahim K. Asante. Today, we are going to look into some of the video questions that you have sent to us via africa@mta.tv email. We will be looking into issues of handshakes in Islam, punishment for adultery and theft, and many other interesting topics or questions that you've sent through. Keep sending your question and don't change the dial. Welcome once again to Your Questions. Welcome to Your Questions. With me today is a missionary from the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, Faraz Yassin Rabbani, to answer your questions for today. Welcome, sir, to Your Questions.
Assalamu alaikum.
The first question is coming all the way from Mauritius. Let's listen to the first question for today.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. My name is Tahir Sani. I'm from Mauritius, and my question is, are men and women allowed to shake hands with each other?
Yes. Tahir from Mauritius is asking, are men and women allowed to shake hands with each other in Islam?
So, Jazakumullah for the opportunity. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Hasan Sahib, when we study Islamic literature and we study the philosophy of Islam and what Islam builds upon, we realize that Islam gives a lot of emphasis on morality, and there are no compromises on that. And the standards of morality and chastity that have been set by Islam cannot be found in any other religion. And Islam has this beauty that it stops a sin at its inception. It will never give it the incubation period so that it does not get out of hands. Because once it crosses some time span, then it's out of hand and it's very difficult to control things at that time. For example, the Holy Quran, to avoid any kind of immoralities in society, it says and it directs the believers that قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ, that tell the believing men to restrain their sight, their gaze, from looking at ladies or the general public out there.
But this is a handshake. This is not the gaze.
Yeah. So it is a very, very systematic way of approaching this this handshake issue that we have at board right now. So once Allah the Almighty has given us this instruction that a believing man should not look at the believing woman or even any other woman, because this is the door to other immoralities. It stops you on the first stage. Then if you are stopped even from gazing at a lady, how can the question of handshake come in? But then for us, we know that Islam is a religion that has provided this segregation of sexes, and it emphasizes on this. The reason is because it's not because we disregard or dishonor ladies, it is rather for the respect and honor of ladies. It is very surprising that some philosophies that have now been mentioned are now being mentioned by the Western bloc was mentioned by Islam 1,400 years ago. This concept of handshake, not shaking the opposite gender, is now being talked too much after this Me Too movement came about. So now it is being mentioned. A research was carried out in UK, and they say 76% of the working people do not want to have physical contact with their employees, because it raises and it gives opportunities to other forms of harassments. So this concept of not shaking hands is not an Islamic concept. Rather, it is the instinct of the human beings that it drives some. Not all men are of the same moral levels. So to avoid it, Islam presents this beautiful law that all the men should avoid shaking the hands of the women, and it's vice versa as well.
So what happens if a woman, not knowing that one is a Muslim, stretches the hand to shake? Would it not be embarrassing not to reciprocate? What
So
do you do?
this is the thing, that once it has come out of nowhere, at that time it's not good to also say no. It's against some laws of hospitality. So for the time being, it's fine, but then you let the person know that in our custom, in our traditions, we do not appreciate this form of greeting. So this is how it can be done. The other way is that normally before we have such meetings, before we have programs, the female guests are informed prior, and the male guests as well are informed prior, that in our custom, in our traditions, we do not appreciate handshakes between the opposite genders. So it is told prior. And secondly, if on the spot, then you can take a handshake. There's not much hue and cry at that time, but then later on, in a very beautiful way, you inform them that this is not how we go about our things.
Would you say that this was also a prophecy or something that Islam has been propagating for a while, and now in this pandemic era where people are discouraged from shaking hands, it's evident to that?
Yeah, the thing is that because of the pandemic, we are seeing the restraint. Before the pandemic, the excuse was there is no restraint to this. You cannot restrain handshakes. But once it's the matter of lives, of physical lives, we are seeing the restraint. Why is it that when it comes to spiritual lives, we were saying that there is no restraint? That means there are double standards somewhere. The faith is not as strong as it should be, or we are not caring for the faith as much as we are caring for our physical bodies. Because once we've got the physical body in question, we've avoided handshakes to the extent that sometimes the person looks very rude, but he still avoids the handshake. He says, it's not good for my health at this time. So why is it not good for your physical health if prior to this you were saying it's not good for your spiritual health as well?
Let's look at it from the African context. I have an auntie. In the African context, I can even hug my auntie. My mother, I can hug her. My sister, I can hug her. Is it allowed in Islam?
When we talk about Islam, and when we talk about segregation of sexes, and in Surah An-Nur of the Holy Quran, Allah the Almighty has drawn the lines. Very clear-cut lines have been drawn from the level of parda, or the level of distance you should have. So your parents, your family members, your very close family members are not part of this list. It is people who can, we have even this concept of incest, which exists in the Western world as well. So those people who are of very close relations to you, your family members, your brothers, your sisters, your father, your mother, these people are not mentioned by Islam that you should take handshake with them. Since it's a very close family member, there is no problem with that. And we find examples in the life of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, that Hazrat Hani, who was a very close relative of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, would even oil his hair for him. So once we talk about very close relatives, there is no problem with that. The problem comes when we've got strangers, once we've got people who are not of the very close direct family.
Or people you can marry?
Yes, people who are not in the prohibited degree of marriage. For them, we apply these rules of segregation of sexes and the handshakes and the hugs.
Well, viewers, that is the answers to your questions with regards to handshake between ladies and gentlemen. Keep your questions coming through to africa@mta.tv, and we will endeavor to bring light to your questions. Let's move. Do you have something to say with regards to...
Before we move on to the next question, for the Muslims, sometimes they do question that how categorical is the statement of not shaking hands with the female. So for us is the example of the Holy Quran and the light and the life of the Holy Prophet, may the peace and blessing of Allah be upon him. So it is mentioned in the narrations of the Holy Prophet, may the peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, that inni la usafihun nisa, that I do not shake hands with females. And even when they would come to take the oath of allegiance at the hands of the Holy Prophet, may the peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, for the men he would put their hands on his and take the oath of allegiance. But for the females, he never did so. And Hazrat Aisha, who is his wife, very noble and honored lady, she narrated that the Holy Prophet ﷺ never touched the hand of a female. So these are the examples for the Muslims to follow. We have very clear-cut teachings before us. So it's best that we don't go into those gray areas and leave things to black and white, as the Holy Prophet, may the peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, has very clearly stated for us.
That is according to Faraz Yassin Rabbani. It is best not to go into the gray areas, but leave things as black and white. Now, let's listen to the next question coming all the way from the Gambia.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Abubakar Bitrawale from the Gambia. My question is it possible to integrate the Islamic economic system with the Western economic system?
So, as you rightly heard from the Gambia, the question is it possible to marry, to integrate, to bring together harmoniously the Islamic economic system with the Western economic system? What are the differences between the two?
When I listen to this question, I would not say that can you integrate the Islamic economic system with the West. Rather, I would say that Islamic economic system provides medical aid to the system that is being used by the West, the economic system.
Are you referring to the Western economic system
Yeah,
as sick?
Very sick. And
with what disease?
With what disease? The disease is the capitalist society is the problem that we are facing in the world. Let me just give you an example here that when the COVID was at the peak, when people were dying out in the world, out of hunger and out of very essential needs, that was the time when billionaires were seeing great strides in their wealth. They amassed a lot of wealth, and there was a statistic that was carried out, and it mentions that $5.2 billion was being added to the wealth of the billionaires.
How?
This was because of the communist system, the capitalist system which is going on. And 24,000 people in the same day were dying because of hunger. So Islam will never integrate with this system that is very, very, very partial, and it supports the system that is making the rich richer and making the poor more poorer.
But some of these rich people were Muslims or are Muslims? Or are we saying that those who benefited from the peak, none of them are Muslims?
No, there might be Muslims in it. The question is not being a Muslim or not being the Muslim. The question here is the system that is being in place. So I would take you briefly through and then would give you the remedy that Islam has provided for this.
Kindly take us
So
through.
we see Islam, before we talk about Islam, let's talk about the system that is being used in the world mostly now is the capitalist system or the communist system. So in capitalism, wealth is kept to the private sector. The labor is kept to the private sector. And in the communist societies, the wealth is kept to the governments, to the states. And you are not paid according to your hard work or your skills. Everyone is treated equally. And in the capitalist system, it's all about your knowledge, and there's no regard for the poorer section of the society. However, when Islam comes in and when religion comes in, it tells you, and the Holy Quran is very explicit on this. The Holy Quran says that وَفِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ, in the wealth of the rich people, حَقٌّ لِلسَّائِلِ وَالْمَحْرُومِ, is the right of the poor and the less privileged. It's not saying that you are giving them your wealth out of a favor. It's saying that there is a right, they have a right in your property.
But
the reason is, before we get to your next question, the reason is because you are building your empire on the hard work and toil of the lower section of the society.
But this is also in the Western world where we have things like corporate social responsibility, or I will put it also as personal social responsibility, where people or businesses set some budget aside to take care of the community in which they work. So we cannot arrogate that to Islam alone. Don't you think so?
Yeah. You see, when we look at the Holy Quran, Allah the Almighty, or the God of Islam, in the very first verse of Surah Al-Fatiha, the opening of the Holy Quran is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim. When we talk about Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahman refers to that God who gives human beings, or who gives his creation without asking. He gives us the sun, he's given us the moon, he's given us light, he's given us water, without we working for that. When we talk about Ar-Rahim, that means he gives you according to your hard work. So we've in the Ar-Rahman, the first attribute where he gives without your hard work, you've got this little iota of communism there. And Ar-Rahim, where you are paid according to your hard work, we've got the little iota of capitalism. But we've not got the six sides of those two systems, because then Allah the Almighty says that everything in this world belongs to me. And you, the rich people, I have given you this wealth, so you take care of it, and then you distribute it to the others.
They are like custodians.
Yeah, you are the custodians. You've been given it, and then you will be asked about it. You will pay every penny. You will be held accountable in the sight of Allah the Almighty for every penny you do, every penny that you've not spent as it should be spent. So that is the two attributes of Allah the Almighty as mentioned.
So
in the
are you
Quran.
saying that if the Rahman, Rahim, the gracious, the merciful, the communist, the capitalist element are in there, are you trying to say that each of the economies are not holistic or complete, rather a hybrid of the communist capitalism, the Western and Islamic, in the right balance is what is needed?
That is what Islam provides. Otherwise, how could you justify the death of 24,000 people in a single day because of essential needs? And the Holy Quran has laid down essential needs that should be given to every person in the society. The Holy Quran says, "Inna laka alla tajua fiha wa la ta'ra," that for human beings, you would not remain hungry in the land, and nor would you remain naked, meaning your clothing and your food should be provided for. And the second part is, wa annaka la tadma'u fiha wa la tadha, you would not remain thirsty, and you would not be exposed to the sun. So there are four things here: your clothing, your food, your water, and your shelter. These four elements are integral for every member of the society, and this is a responsibility of the Islamic economic system. Once the Islamic economic system comes into place, then these four essential elements of human life would be given to every human being. And this would come through the system of zakat. The system of zakat is a very, very beautiful system that provides answers to almost...
What's the meaning of zakat?
Zakat means that the rich people who have gotten an amount of money which they have not spent. For the layman, let me put it in the sense that this country, in very simple language, we have 1,000 CDs in this country. So what happens is, after 2 years, the rich elite have gathered 900 CDs out of the 1,000 CDs. So the rest of the population is going to depend on 100 CDs, which would cause inflations, because that 900 CDs has been kept by the rich people. So what to do? Islam says, once you've got to that level, you've got to pay 2.5% of the wealth which you were not using back to the system of the society, so that this system would run.
So do you pay to the government or the mosque,
once you've got the Islamic society, Islamic economic system, you would provide it to the state, who would then pass it on through the economic system, and this flow of money would continue running. Otherwise, the money would keep on accumulating in the accounts of the rich, and the poorer would get poorer, the rich would get richer. So the Islamic system, the zakat, would bring back that money into the hands of the poor.
So we are not in an Islamic country here, for example, in Ghana. So how does one pay his or her zakat?
So this is how we pay the zakat, that the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, by the grace of Allah the Almighty, is very organized. So the rich members of this community who have reached that threshold of richness pay their money into the system of this Jamaat, of this community of Allah the Almighty, and then through our different channels, this money is sent out to the poor, fulfilling those four needs of human beings that I have mentioned that have been mentioned in the Holy Quran. So those four needs are still being provided through our Jamaat to the poor people of this world.
Well, will it be okay for one to also see a needy person and apply the 2.5% without going through any system?
The problem or the caveat with this would be that there would be no accountability. To the state, to the government. You know, this once on a lower scale there will be no problems, but once we talk about this on a larger scale, the trails of money is very important for the government and to keep everyone accountable. Who knows, and how would you know that the person you've spent on was actually the most rightful owner of that money? It is when all these things are well documented in the Islamic system, and then through the Islamic system or through the Islamic government, this money would be dispatched, or those aids would be dispatched to the most needy of the society.
Yes, that has been the answers to the second question from the Gambia, which was, is it possible to integrate the Muslim economic system with the Western system? With me here at the Wahab Adam Studios in Ghana, answering your questions is Faraz Yassin Rabbani, a missionary of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. Now, let's move on to the next question, coming all the way from Uganda.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm Nasul Majawa from Uganda, and my question is, what is the Islamic punishment for theft and adultery?
Yes. What is the Islamic punishment for theft and adultery?
By the looks of the question, it looks to be a very simple question with a simple answer, especially the side that talks about adultery. But when we go a little deep, as I would go to explain this issue to some extent, you would realize that's how beautiful the teachings of Islam are. And there are some out there who, because of their false sentiments, are swayed to think that Islam is a religion that is very harsh and hard. But that's never the case, as I would mention now.
Well, when you hear of punishment, you'll be right to think of harshness, wouldn't you?
Now, when we talk about adultery and the punishment for adultery in Islam, so the Holy Quran says in Surah An-Nur that الزانية والزاني فاجلدوا كل واحد منهما مئة جلدة, that a man who commits adultery and the female who commits adultery, both of them should be lashed 100 times. This is the Islamic punishment for adultery. However, the question that comes here is that the condition on which this should be applied is that there should be 4 witnesses to this action. Now, a very natural question is, how would someone ever find 4 witnesses to an intimate relation? It's almost impossible unless and until this action is being committed in public and spoiling the morals of the society. If someone is doing his business in his own room, you will never get 4 witnesses to that. You get 4 witnesses when only the person is morally degrading the society.
So are you saying it is okay, it is cool for somebody to do it if he's not found?
No, Allah the Almighty,
because it's not degrading the society?
Allah the Almighty has said very clearly, La taqrabu zina, that do not go near fornication and adultery. But I am referring to the punishment, that this punishment would only apply when you get 4 witnesses to this action. And 4 witnesses will only be found when the person is morally destroying the society. This is to say that this punishment is not for the action. It is for the ripple effects this action is having, because he is not destroying himself, he is destroying the entire society. That's the first thing. The second thing is that when we look at the wordings of this verse of the Holy Quran, it's not saying that's the adulterer, it's saying azani with alif lam, which is called alif lam al-istighraq, which refers to a person who is very habitual in this, and as I mentioned earlier on, is spoiling others as well. That's when this punishment will come into place. The other thing is that we have this debate out there, and it is very unfortunate that there are some Muslims who take to stoning as the punishment for adultery. And we've got these...
Stoning to kill?
Death. Yeah,
to death?
stoning to death. And these actions, these brutalities were committed in the name of Islam and are being committed by some extremist groups out there. However, it's very clear that I have mentioned the Islamic punishment. However, stoning to death is a punishment of the Bible. When we read the book of Deuteronomy, we find that the Jewish punishment for adultery is stoning, and it's never an Islamic punishment. However, there is an instance where we...
So are you saying that the Jewish punishment is harsher, or the Christian punishment in the Bible is harsher than the Islamic punishment?
I am saying so because they question the Islamic punishment that Islam says we should stone the adulterer to death. It's never Islam. It's the Christians who accept the Old Testament and the Jews who believe in the Old Testament, and it's their scriptures that say that a person should be stoned to death, anyone who commits adultery.
But Muslims are expected to believe in the Bible as well. So would you not say by that inference, Muslims too believe in that stoning, because it's one of the 6 beliefs?
This takes me to the question I was about to answer earlier on, that we find in the narration of the Holy Prophet, may the peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, that he stoned a lady. He ordered that a lady should be stoned to death because of adultery. So there are 2 scenarios to this. The first is that she was a Jewish lady, and the beauty of the Islamic society is that you are judged according to your book. You are a Muslim, you'll be judged according to the Holy Quran. You are a Jew, you'll be judged according to the Jewish scriptures. This is how beautiful and harmonious the Islamic teaching was. So when this lady was judged, she was judged because of her belief. She was a Jew, so a Jewish law was applied. And the second notion to this is that before the Quran was revealed to the Holy Prophet ﷺ, he would apply the law of the Mosaic dispensation. As long as the Islamic law did not come, the Holy Prophet, may the peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, would rely on the Torah, the Old Testament, to give his verdicts on any kind of situation or scenario that was presented before him. So, but once the Islamic teaching came, which is the most beautiful of all teachings, and it is for till time immemorial. So now we've got the Islamic law, and now the Islamic law is that once you find 4 witnesses, which you would not find, but it is only when the person starts to morally corrupt the society that you've got to reprimand him for his action.
So you don't reprimand him if 1 person or 2 people know, just because 4 people haven't been
a witness,
to say yes?
Yeah, that's exactly how the Islamic law works. That unless you've got 4 witnesses, and I'm stressing on this because the punishment is when he is spoiling the society, when he is corrupting the society, is when the Islamic law comes to place.
So when he's not corrupting the society,
then you leave his action to Allah the Almighty, and his reward or his punishment would lie with Allah the Almighty. It is when he starts influencing other people that you've got to deter him from that.
Coming to the punishment for theft, what is the Islamic prescription?
The Islamic law applies only when you live in an Islamic society. We cannot live in Ghana here or in UK or US and start applying Islamic punishments. We cannot apply them because we have not trained them in the Islamic way. Islamic punishments will come into action only when the society is living in the Islamic way. And the Islamic society, one criteria or prerequisite for an Islamic society is to provide for the living of every person in that society. The food, the water, the housing, the shelter is all upon the government, that these essential items or elements for the human being should be provided to him. And then after that, when the person goes out there to steal, and not to steal for the first, second time, the verse of the Holy Quran that talks about the punishment for the theft is as-sariq, again with the alif lam, that talks about a person who is a hardened criminal. As-sariqu was-sariqa faqta'u aydiyahuma, that a person who is a hardened criminal, be it a male or a female, you should cut off the hands of such a person.
Cutting off a hand?
Yeah.
Is that not so barbaric?
Is it more barbaric than that hardened criminal going out to kill innocent civilians when he's robbing and committing thefts? And this is the problem, as I mentioned earlier on, that people are swayed by the sentiments that how can you cut off the hand of a person? But keep in mind that this person would go on to kill and destroy the lives of hundreds out there.
But in situations where we see petty thieves still getting their hands cut off just because they stole some tomatoes or some apple, and people apply the Islamic laws, the Sharia, that he has stolen, so his hand has to be cut.
This is extremely against the Islamic notion. Islam, as I mentioned on...
But that's what's happening.
Yeah, you cannot judge the deed of one person and call it Islamic. For us, it's the Holy Quran. and the teaching of the Holy Prophet ﷺ and his Khulafa. And as I mentioned earlier on, that the Islamic law would come into action when you are living in an Islamic society, and when the person is a hardened criminal and he is an armed robber who is threatening to destroy the peace of the society, is when you would have to bring this deterrence to stop others from committing such crimes. And this is what the Holy Quran says, that to stop evil at the first stage is better than to stop evil when it's crossed all limits. And when this is what we're witnessing now.
But cutting the hands is when it's crossed all limits.
Yeah, when the person has, despite being given all that he needs for his living, despite being admonished time and again, and still goes out there to spoil the Islamic society or to spoil the peace of the society, which could later on lead to civil wars, and then hundreds will be dead. Isn't it better to stop the person at the first stage than to wait for hundreds to be dead, and then wait for an accident that was to come? We stop it on the first stage.
But the challenge is, how do we, or does the society get to know whether this person is a hardened criminal or not? Because a thief is a thief. All you hear is thief, thief, thief. They get a person, and in some societies in Africa and other places, they would even burn the person down to ashes.
Taking the law in your own hands is never advisable and never allowed in the Islamic society. We've got the government that should be responsible for this. But as I mentioned earlier on, that unless you have the Islamic society. Now, for example, we live in this world where we know, if not all, most of the politicians are known to have involved themselves in such actions. So imagine that today one party comes into power and tries to implement the Islamic law and would cut off all the hands of the opposition and claim that they are thieves. The next time the opposition comes into power, and they would cut off the hands of those who had cut off their hands. So
we'll have a country with one hand people.
Yeah, we would have a country that is playing a Tom and Jerry game. So to avoid this, as I mentioned earlier on, that we need a divine system, as was done after the Holy Prophet ﷺ. We need a divine society that is living very peacefully, that is abiding by the Islamic laws. And once we've got those Islamic laws and the harmony of the Islamic society, when no one sleeps hungry, when no one sleeps with worries, you've got a government that thinks about every human being. Then when somebody goes out to commit evil in the society, so to deter others, he needs to be given a deterrent so that others will not go into that.
Thank you very much, Faraz Yassin Rabbani, answering questions coming to us today all the way from Mauritius, the Gambia, and Uganda. Please keep your questions coming through, your video questions, to africa@mta.tv, and we will endeavor to bring you guests who are knowledgeable to answer your questions. I remain Ibrahim K. Asante. Make a date with us in the next session of your questions. Thank you very much.